Hello, Tom Homan in Fox News. It is recorded how the agencies, including former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, he has roles planting predicate acts with facts methods. There is a method recorded that has methods as through collusions with itself. Also at countries A through Z, keeping them consciously blaming other things other than themselves for things that it caused. That's why things that aren't debatable, that about being practical, for example, are prevented to practicality and rolls with the hyper evidential, so to speak. For example, we have black people's rights of eyes, and you guys have all kinds of drugs and medicines, crimes and delusions, and criminally foreign influence, factual nature, quiet aspects in nature, and as collusions with the people that are countering you too. That are collusions with there are rackets at spots supposed to be given our own homeland due process. We don't have due process. It is measured and maintained. They are measured and maintained self-valued roles and needs and natures and styles, pretending not to realize, pretending it's debatable, just to fake our and change our words, our communications about the very predicate acts that show it's true, and the whole predicate acts methods that are that are simultaneously involved, including the singular breaching method that countries A through Z guys blamed other things other than themselves exactly the way it wanted and needs. James Madison and the founders behind him and his plan. His plan was to counter extort the rest of the founders as the rest of the presidents and who would be president. I mean, in other words, presidents slash chiefs. But George Washington agreed to be part of them and be grouped a founder and president. But I mean, no, James Madison's our founder because they all had to lie about their motivations. Not one person had free speech. Not any group had free speech. No country, any grouping of countries that was his locations, areas, states already used remotely in layers. They didn't even fathom use of location /s consciously how it works. It is where and how at the state judicial branch offices of Connecticut and at the corrections offices, all along roads and routes, conjunctive to them and conjunctions to that. They have been planting predicate acts with facts, needs, natures, and styles, as sense and sensibilities, to use Jan Austen's phrase, sensing for the human fact, human nature breaching method. That is one of the things that is true always, that slavery is about. Nature itself and science, honest, would have shown us and showed little kids, no, that to be, to teach American history right, you don't leave out the human fact, human nature breaching method. You don't leave out all those forced roles with things that no one wanted collusions with and how that's discernible. But the way American history is foretold is our founders communicated that they did not have free speech. They communicated why they did not have free speech. They communicated how they did not have free speech. There was a witch trials place next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum, in layers of sensibilities, roles, and things like that, needs and natures, narratives, still replacing what our founders communicated about that place and about why and how our founders didn't have means to get unentrenched. Roles with slavery, northern colonies and southern colonies entrenched. That's worse than just obfuscated too. American history is told through the breaching method. All identities of sophistication have stayed criminal and seditious natures of positive, criminal and seditious natures of sophistication. As time, collusion /s with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. You guys are arrays of difference, A through Z. Suits and ties, counters, exceptions, used as an array, used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw, incapable of affording to be. Words with care for any difference, like of the name police form. The police departments have collusions with all kinds of drugs and medicines crimes, and families involved with predicate acts with facts, involved with the communications, racketeering, worse than war crimes method. Also with uses of confessions, three ways. One way to itself. In other words, for example, the breaching method used confessions, making and used everyone blaming other things others themselves on things that it forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to become, needed to be blamed, needed to be countered syntactically, therefore, rather, and physically, simultaneously, to keep them defending their own syntactical abridgments roles, more and more their own syntactical torture, extortion, and factory nature slavery roles, and with all exceptions and exception nature and demonstration of the same thing. Instead, being and having been used remotely, shown how to use that, and self-value fake exceptions, like saying and doing things online or at locations as collusion /s to force things before courts, or before police roles with overt criminal enterprise, private ones, and all natures of investigations. Investigators kept needing to self-value the same sequenceships, the same delusions, the same criminally foreign influence, factory nature, quality aspects and natures, and role you in styles in nature and differences used to screen how they're getting over on difference, on the hyper difference, that which shows us we are different from other species' bodies, for that body which is not us nor the other species' bodies, but it has each species body, an individual species body of a whole bunch of individuals with all group differences that generated by its own individual value/value progression as a trinity vaccines. In other words, it's just things. but you guys are preventing mandated law with wire and mail crime acts and methods. The agencies have roles with former director of the F.B.I, Robert Luskin, also with digital crimes, with the people involved with the phone companies. They have something to do with Knott Street, I believe KNOTT, but now they have an NOTT Street at the corner of it in Ridge Road is a Paul Kelly involved with Air Force and neighbors of his involved further with their kids too, with some sexual and medical offenders of kids and judges and prosecutors and their family members involved, and witness protect and victims advocates with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, foreign and domestic military, involved with the names and interreligious nutbags and people tied to them, next to the state capitol of Connecticut. So please, Tom Holman, too. Let them get on paper one name in sequence. Harvard Hospital put me in fake conversations with themselves and others. They have a Brendan Leahy as one of the ones involved with some judges and prosecutors like a Brian Silver, involved with former director of the F.B.I, Robert Luskin, the Britain Superior Court, Connecticut's District Court, and Harper Courts before the World Trade Center attack. They're putting their roles of predicate acts at West Hartford locations, the Britain locations, Wethersfield locations, also on off the state conjunction, the state judicial branch offices, and the state corrections offices, and conjunctions to it, next to it, or just going by it. The difference of that too is exploited as people involved with them with the World Trade Center predicate acts, like the ones that WFSB pretended me and fake conversations with themselves and with others about the World Trade Center attack, as the recorded collusion /s with names on all sides as countries involved and differences involved. Like they have investigators that are being and haven't been used remotely, criminally foreign influence /hyper criminally foreign influence through the World Trade Center, also involved with predicate acts with facts methods into databases. And as the people collusion /s on the judicial branch offices of Connecticut and the different natures of conjunctions to it, like Wethersfield Pizza House has roles with overt criminal enterprises and private ones in foreign countries, intercities too, next to campuses, and with their educators of a Stephen Stocko And of Maria Pazino, I never saw Maria Pazino on a Weathersfield campus in my life. She's involved with Stephen Stockwell and people from Central Connecticut State University on all sides of it, and other boyfriends she had too, including there are proofs that FBI Director Robert Lusky and or his lawyer and his co-defendants and their family members and her neighbors involved with New Haven. One time she asked me to go to New Haven with her for fake ties, fake natures of ties to be in sequence ships, cover-ups, fake motivations for it. Because one of their motivations that they need to hide is roles with the breaching method, forcing, tricking, hurting, and persuading other things, others ourselves. Blamed for that too. Ugh. So increasingly, people that lived around the South CBL, like Brian Bonin, he's involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with a Paul Zano, sequence ships, wire crime acts and methods, with courts and prosecutors, and people involved with untimely death rolls and murders and guns crimes with kids, with people with a South CBL and people that live near him through time. Involved too with the more sexual and medical offenders of kids. It has something to do with the roles all along Route 3, which is one of the conjunctions to the state judicial branch offices. There's also their rules with Facebook, all kinds of insidious ways, and other agencies and countries are involved. And they're gonna leak that more and more while they're preventing me from getting a response from anyone on paper. And they attach me to fake doctors, intercities who are connected. And the other doctors I barely spoke with, they change and fake what's recorded. They have their kids involved too in their confessions. They bring their kids in because the breaching method needs to keep and the FBI directors, plural now. There's a James Comey, it might have been him personally with New Britain Superior Court, as one of the ones involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, and their lawyer, having been planting evidences, intercities, and roles as collusions with various natures of organized crime to people on off the campuses, abuses of the kids, of the leaders of the campuses, intercities, and the campus's leaders, specifically to have the other kids hurt, and the difference of that to keep styles, needs, and natures, self-valued roles with which we're going to observe how everything's actually unfolding, having unfolded. Increasingly, Weathersfield mayors have roles with fire departments and higher natures of politicians, increasingly involved with the locations associated with that. In other words, as increasingly their roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and putting fake things in databases and acting tied to it. And with the people, in other words, everyone's speaking to us, and everyone's changing everyone's words to make it look like them while they're ignoring us. I'm just saying this because these are people that have involved with them putting fake and changed communications in databases. Increasingly, campuses film 24/7. They do a phenomenon where they put fake transcripts and change it and just totally fake and change what's actually recorded. But they totally fake it too. Eric Burgess was one of the ones with the foreign and domestic military, also a Mark Violet and a Justin Klavinskis, and people involved with a Mazzucato Bakery and a modern pastry involved with a John Mayano, per him, and his family members. I never met his father. I walked by his mother one time and never had a word of conversation with her. They're involved with sequence chefs and people with medical and sexual offenders of kids with my neighbors. But their roles not with that, but through identity theft, their roles with investigators use criminally foreign influence. Their roles acting tied to people that are putting predicate acts with facts in databases and at interbranch locations. A bunch of people at the Britain Superior Court and the District Court have roles with sequence ships and criminally foreign influence collusions with a Jonathan Mayano that he doesn't even know the extent of. But that's why these are people need to get on paper. They should have gotten on paper a long time ago. And they've been lying about what they think, about what I said in my speech class about my car and driving fast. In other words, these are people increasingly involved interstates with Washington, D.C. and the World Trade Center from years before, who also have collusions with the founding locations and conjunctions to them, and all from the founding locations in Old Weathersfield, all along from Main Street where it turns into Route 175, right through Weathersfield, right through Newington, and into New Britain. Are people involved with my neighbors and with their educators involved with identity theft, fraud, slayings, putting fake things in databases, but as collusions with judges, prosecutors, people on the judicial branch office, corrections officers, and conjunctions to them that have been putting fake wire crimes and things off campus to their acting tied to those predicate acts, including with more predicate acts, and with as collusions with WFSB and WTNH at corners of streets. Timothy O'Brien has roles. He's one of the intelligence families on my street who has roles planting evidences, timing when I'm going to be, even when I'm driving with the corners of streets on a principal upskirt nature's campus, who is involved also with more sexual medical offenders of kids, tied to an O'Brien family with multiple police departments and jails involved, and their collusions with names at the judicial branch offices and corrections offices, also with foreign and domestic military, with this O'Brien and Colo, but not the ways they pretending, like like associated with like implied like with the nature of relationship between the family of Aaron Mate, family slash S of Aaron Mate, who looks much like one of the Demoros, involved with the name Napolitano, involved with federal evidences crimes and wire crime acts and methods and sequence shifts and putting predicate acts with facts and databases against people that don't even have classes together, with people that are spreading lies about others and trying to make it look like maybe those people make self-eyed rules with it because they're not going to tell on people. I mean, not tell on, but you have to tell on people. You have to call them out and stuff. You're not going to, you start becoming, the courts do things with that the breaching method makes them do. And so they say, why would you say something? People are constantly, people that don't even know people are saying things that people they don't even know. For the extent of the time, never stop being needs to hide lie progressions by the difference of their guilt at the courts, at the police forms, at the interbranch, at the same time, increasingly too, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists. Originally, still the same method. /S, the /S part as roles, and pretending other as sides as one array used remotely. So we have people fighting about due process. There are methods preventing due process on a mass scale. And then pretending people don't know because are they mentally competent for trial? They're putting charges with no writing and making confessions about switching officers' names and time collusions with people with rape threats and forced child abuses of kids. They want the parents and the family members to go nuts. They put me in fake conversations about my family members too. They put it like a little novel, fake conversations. You have a Leahy family increasingly involved with Connecticut courts, with the New Britain Superior Court, a whole bunch of people tied from other areas to predicate acts on my street and confessions tied to them. With a Leahy family, judges, there's a judge killing and criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, speaking sequence shifts, fake things in records, roles changing and faking digital evidences with child sex offenders, including a principal upskirt nature, all kinds of drugs and medicines, crimes with you guys and with the prisons and all natures of police forms, all natures of differences with the identities of the law. When did you guys have the audacity or the people countering you to speak for law? You guys came through criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw campuses. When do you guys have the audacity to debate that, black pupils? Here, it is time. It is time. See Marbury versus Madison, read it again, because you guys have replaced how James Madison had to counter-extort the other founders, with the founders, Native American, and the rest of the grouping with the colonists. They had to counter-extort the rest of the colonists who wouldn't agree because there were all too many already tortured, extorted, enslaved, locked into all kinds of reasons why they couldn't, syntactically, physically. The same thing, with the Native Americans. Same thing with the colonists. There's three natures of Native American founders. Two, even before our founders were born. Even before Columbus sailed the ocean blue. There was a hyper-foreign breaching method that had already been sustained on names A through Z. as the phenomenon of countries that have to be operated by locations, areas, and states. Games, therefore, syntax nature. Black pupils must gather species, body, strength, and might. We must fight, but by the rules to reveal where we all win at the same time. We have to force equality of fact, human nature. That their identities of law, their difference can't be, they can't defend that and afford to be, let alone to protract what which trials are about, how to explain that properly. You don't leave out what the slavery laws were about. You don't leave out the same exact breaching method with differences and the Native American differences. In other words, and having been that way, in many pray to seek this through and done. Boxing is fun, one way, but many pray. All tread, prepare to gain the gain of gains, who disbelieves. They switch and forge names into branch. They refuse to identify themselves legitimately as their roles with the different agencies, with the audacity, pretend they could speak for the law and not realize how people need to call that out. Please allow me to, Tom Holman, get them on paper, one name in sequence, with the people forging and switching names at the British Superior Court. Watch what I caught them doing with the hate groups, some black KKK, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme. See Mark Violet and Mike Violet and their mother and their roles with Yukon, with foreign and domestic military, with people with, with Zano and Mayano through a time, involved planting evidences between campuses. Also with more people with the campuses involved at Central Connecticut State University that have placements with campuses intercities and has them as sense and sensibilities where good people are kept evil. And that would be overcome if you would force mandated laws. Mandated law is supposed to be, you're not supposed to fake and change what I say and get away with it because you have self-value rules with the agencies and courts, with digital crime methods and the forensics locations, changing and faking what's actually digitally recorded. Joshua Julian is collusions with Facebook itself, and with the British Superior Court and a principal upskirt nature's Facebook page of his school. Also with people with the name O'Neill, involved with foreign and domestic military, with whiting forensics through time, and overt criminal enterprises and private ones, increasingly involved with mayors and people who are also involved with people with home break-ins and state police families, interstates, involved time collusions with overt criminal enterprise, private ones, and differences racketeering worse than war crimes and cover-ups of it while pretending other. Black pupils, period. They're not just really that stupid and insidious to think that we all should gather behind countering racism. They need unity of black and white types, only known so they can jump in with a bunch of fakes when some people start speaking correctly and keep possession inter and intra cultural. Keep all fakes speaking for which difference in saying. Black pupils, let nature lead this conversation as it shows. Who disbelieves? That's why we need a Who Disbelieves Act. Real quick, we'll show them how to think. Nature itself will lead how we write acts, like the IACE Act, the Anti-Hyperarchetypal Criminal Enterprise Act. Black pupils, it is time we force our peer. That means a peer who disbelieves. In other words, I'll show you guys how, because we have to put some things in there during negotiations now and negotiate. Though they're nutbags with the natures of industries, criminal and citizen's natures of them. They can't defend themselves and afford to be. Those identities of industry to be appreciated as they are as criminal and citizen's natures. Criminally foreign influence, tactics, delusions, raw, quality aspects of nature the suburbs have, designed for torture, extortion, and slavery, to cause negative value nature, progressions, acts of nature, to be a standing landscape theater, needing more and more to self-value rules with only means to cause more positive value nature, progressions, acts of nature, more and more the only ones created for people to feed themselves, to self-value rules of criminally insidious natures of positive value nature, progression, acts of nature systems. Not really positive. This is, nature shows us science has obligations to discern the difference between criminal and citizen's natures of peace and peace that is not criminal and citizen's nature of itself. Therefore, nature showing us means and needs to discern. Hyper peace, distinct from peace. Campus Martius rises, north and south and west and east. Peace. Thank you. Shout out to the beast.